Hey guys, welcome back to the MediTrack tutorial series. And in this video, we're going to be building the patient management page where the clinic staff can actually add, update, or delete patient information from the system. Now, this is an important part of the project. Every patient record we manage here is going to be linked to services and visits later on. Now, before we go even further, and because we've already set up our database and completed our admin login and our registration, I think it's a proper time for us to go ahead and test this to see if it actually works as expected. So what I can do is in my login.php page, I can click on register here, put in a username. So I'll put in user 7890 and I'll put in a password and I'm going to put in the same password and then I'm going to hit register. So now it says that my registration is successful. So let me go into my database and see if that is indeed so. So if I go into my database and I refresh, I will then see that I now have a user 7890 and with also the user also has a hashed password, which is what we coded. So now in my register page, I now have a login now, but link that I can go ahead and click. And when I click it, I can put in the information that I registered with. And then when I hit login, I will see that I get this page which says not found. Now, why does it say page not found? Because if you look in the URL at the top, you will see that it is pointing us to a page which we have not created yet, which is our dashboard.php. But what we do know is that our system actually works up till this point. Now let's go ahead and build the patient management page. So I'm going to build my patient management page inside of my admin folder. So I'm going to go to my admin folder and select new file. And then I'm going to call this file patients.php. So this is going to be our patient management page. Now inside this page, we can go ahead and begin to actually develop our interface. In this case, one of the first things that I'm going to do is to create the interface that's going to allow us or allow our user to actually um, be able to manage patients. So I'm going to put in my HTML5 boilerplate. I'm going to give this page a title of Manage Patients. Manage Patients. I'm going to also point it to our style sheet, which already exists. So I'm going to put in a CSS link and point it to CSS and styles.css. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create our form. So I'm going to go between our body tags here and I'm going to put in an H1 for my heading. So I'm going to say manage patients. And then below that, I'm going to put in my form. Once again, I have already created this form. So I'm going to go and copy and paste my form onto my page. And you can pause the video in order for you to be able to get all of this put in and typed in appropriately. So let's go ahead now and see if we can build a proper engine that's going to use this form to be able to update our, manage, sorry, our patients. You will notice that I have a form whose method is post. I have an input field for ID, which states that it's only for updating. Okay, and we'll see why in a minute. We have an input area for the name, the email, and the phone. So this form is going to be the form that we're going to use to add a new patient or update a new patient, or as you will see later on, we also are going to use this page for deleting patients. So at the top, one of the first things that we're going to do after creating our HTML page is we're going to open our PHP tags. And these PHP tags need to be closed because we have HTML content below it. And inside of there, we now need to include a couple of files that's going to allow our page to be able to do what is necessary. One of the first files that we need to include is going to be our database connection. So I'm going to include and I'm going to put in the location for this. Now, seeing as our patients.php file is not in the root of our project folder, it is now in the admin folder. In order to point to a file which is in our root, we have to use this strange looking syntax in order to do that, which is the two dots followed by the forward slash. And then we're going into our includes folder, and then we're going to select our dbconnect.php. We also need to include our authcheck.php security file. Remember, our authcheck security file is supposed to check if an admin is logged in, and if an admin is not logged in, it's going to redirect them back to the login page. This page is for managing patients. So we're going to assume that the only way that an admin or someone is going to see this page is if they are actually logged into the system. And authcheck is going to allow us to make sure of that. And then thirdly, this is something that you would have seen before, and I'm sure you would know what I'm doing with it. I'm going to create a message variable, which is going to be equal to an empty string. And right away, I'm also going to go down into my form, and I'm going to go right below my heading here, and I'm going to echo out this message variable. So whatever messages that I have for my user or to display to my user are going to be displayed like before, right? Coming from this message variable in my PHP echo shorthand here, and it is going to be seen, okay? It is going to be seen in this particular area right here, okay? So let's continue. Now, like you've seen before, okay, anytime that we're pulling information from a form, anytime that you're pulling information from a form, you're going to have to ensure that whatever engine that you're building for it does not run as soon as the page loads. Now, in our case here for our page, in our case here for our page, we have a form and that form has two buttons. And those two buttons are going to be used to either add a patient or update a patient. Now, as a matter of fact, let's see if we can actually see what our page looks like currently so we could see exactly what I'm referring to. So I'm going to go back over to my page here, which was trying to be displayed after we had logged in. And since we currently don't have a link to that page as yet, but we still can pull up that page, by simply going into the URL and typing patients.php. And right away, we see what it is that we have. So we have an ID field only for updating, name, email, phone, a button for add patient, and a button for update patient. So the individual will put the information into this form and click either the add patient button or the update patient button. Now we'll notice that my CSS is not being applied, so that would mean that there is an issue that we need to fix. So if I go back to my patients.php page into my HTML, I will notice that I am indeed, it seems that I'm pointing to the correct styles.css style sheet. But unlike login and unlike register, these two files sit in the root of my project. So therefore, the href or the pointing to my CSS file is as simple as pointing to the folder and then making sure that folder actually has the styles.css style sheet. But in the case of our patients.php, this file sits actually inside a folder inside the root. And just like we did for our includes at the top, since this is the case, we need to use this weird looking syntax that we have up here. So we're going to put our two dots and our forward slash, which indicates to us that this file is is outside of the folder that we're currently sitting in, and it's in the root. So now that I've made this change, if I go back to my page and I refresh, we see that our CSS is now being applied. So this is what we're going to use for adding a patient or updating a patient. If someone has to add a patient, they will put in the name, the email, and the phone number for the patient and hit add. If someone wants to update a patient, they're going to put in the ID to identify which patient it is, the name, the email, and the phone, and they're going to hit update patient. So let's get back to our code. So now, right, now that we have this, we can now go ahead and begin to give power to our two buttons. So one button, when clicked, okay, is going to add the patient. One button, when clicked, is going to update the patient. So let's deal with the adding of the patient first. So I'm going to put a little comment here, and I'm going to say that this part is going to add a patient. Okay, and now we're going to do what we've done before. We're going to check if our server request method is post. So this is one of the first things we're going to do. So we're going to check if our server, okay, request method, request method, okay, which needs to be in quotes, by the way, and we'll use single quotes for this one. So if our server request method is equal to post, and not just if it's equal to post. Remember, we now have two buttons that are going to be clicked either or. So if our server request method is post and is set, and we're going to check for the clicking of the add button. Add. Okay. So if the server request method is post and our post button is set, like this is what was clicked, both of these conditions have to be true, then everything that happens inside of here is going to be to be verified and is going to be enacted. So the next thing we have to do is we need to collect the information from the form. Now for add, we are simply putting in a name, an email, and a phone. We're not putting in an ID. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So name, email, and phone. And name is going to be equal to what's coming out of the form, which is $_post. And the name of the input area is name. Okay. Email, $_post. Name of the input area is email. That should be outside. And this one is going to be equal to $_post. And that is going to be for phone. Let's fix that. Phone. Okay. Now, just like before, we're taking information from a form and we're putting that information into our database. So therefore, some kind of security and sanitization is required. The first level of sanitization is to ensure that we don't have any extra spaces to the front or back of whatever the user is entering. So in order to protect ourselves from that, we're going to trim this. So we're going to trim this and we're going to wrap each one in our trim function. And we're going to do that to each of these. So trim here and trim here and also trim for phone. The next level is for us to sanitize, is to protect these fields from direct SQL injection. And in order to protect it from direct SQL injection, we need to use the MySQLi direct injection for that. So let's wrap this in MySQLi underscore MySQLi underscore real underscore escape underscore string. And we're going to wrap this entire thing in parentheses. And we're going to do the same thing for each one. And since this is a little long, I'm going to copy the phrase here. And I'm going to paste the phrase. And I'm going to put my open parentheses. And I'm going to put my close parentheses. Let's do the same here. And open parentheses. And there's one more value that we need to put in this MySQLi real escape string SQL injection protection. We need to put in the connection to the database, which is con. So in each case, we're going to put in con, which gives it tells us, where we're going with this. Okay, so con in each case. So yes, we have sanitized the input. We have protected ourselves from SQL injection. We've removed any empty spaces. So let's go on now. The user has clicked the add button. What is next? We're going to provide the user with some healthy levels, of error checking and messaging. So error checking and messaging means that we need to, first of all, make sure that when the user clicks the button, that none of the fields that should be filled are not empty. So we're going to say if, okay, name is empty. So if empty, name or um, empty email or empty phone, okay, then something is going to happen. And that something is going to be that we're going to take our message variable like we did before. We're going to put something inside of it. And what I'm going to put inside of it is going to be a paragraph. So I'm going to open and close my paragraph tags. And inside that paragraph tags, I'm going to say all fields are required. All fields are required. And I'm going to give this paragraph a class of error. And I'm going to give it a class of error because I'm styling these classes in a particular way. Everything that has a class of error is being styled in a particular way with my semicolon in. And this ensures that no field that's required for this situation is left empty. And if something is missing, then we're going to show an error message. So this checks if the fields are empty, and if the fields are empty, message is going to store this, and then it's going to be echoed down here in our form or above our form. But what happens if everything is fine? If everything is fine and these fields are not empty, then we need to push this information into our database. So we're going to create our very familiar SQL variable, which is going to hold our SQL statement. So we're going to be inserting into the patients table, because that's the name of our table. And what are we going to be inserting? We're going to be inserting the name. We're going to be inserting email. We're going to be inserting phone. Okay? Now, these are supposed to match the headings of the fields in our tables. So let's go ahead and do a quick double check inside our table, our patients table, and we see that we have name, we have email, and we have phone. Now, there's a reason why in the form it says only add the ID if you are updating. And realize that in the patients table, the ID is actually not put in by the user, but if we click on structure, you will see that the ID is actually an auto-incremented ID. So we're not the ones creating the ID, but SQL in my PHP MyAdmin is what is creating our IDs. So that's the reason why we are not putting in the ID unless we are actually updating. Okay? Because if we were to put in an ID, then it would overwrite the ID that we currently have. And we don't want that. So we're not finished with our SQL statement. Okay, name, email, and phone. And now we have to tell it what values we want to put. And those values are coming from what the user put in for name. And they need to be in quotes. So $name, okay, comma, we're going to put in $email, which is our email variable, comma, and then we're going to put in our phone variable. And these are our values that we're going to be pushing into our database. Okay? Now, this isn't the end. We now need to send this query into our database. And we do that in the familiar fashion, MySQLi underscore query. We are going to give it the connection con, and we're going to give it its parcel that it needs to take to the database, which is our SQL statement. Okay. And also, we want to let the user know that this was successful. So let's let the user know that this was successful. And how do we let the user know that this was successful? Well, we produce a message. So in my message variable, I'm going to put in a paragraph. I'm going to copy this one. Let's just copy this. Let's be a little lazy. And I'm going to paste this here and adjust it. So in my paragraph, I'm going to give this one a class of success because this is styled differently. And I'm going to put in here patient added successfully. I'm going to say patient added successfully. Okay. And that is our adding of a user, of a new patient, sorry. Okay. Now we have an error here. I'm missing a semicolon. So let's put that in and our error goes away. So at this point, we can safely go ahead and add a new patient into the system. Let's give it a test and let's see if it actually works. So I'm going to go over to my Manage Patients table and I'm not going to put in an ID. I'm going to put in a name. So let me put in my own name, Clendon Bissett. I'm going to put in my email. I'm just going to put in a fake email. So cbset@email.com. And my phone is going to be 758 111 and 1111. And when I click add patient, it says all fields are required. So let's see why we're getting this error. Because as far as we know, once we put in a name, an email, and a phone, and we hit add patient, we do not need to put in an ID. We should not get this error. So let's go back to our code and let's look at our code. And right away, I see the issue here, which is my error. Instead of this, I'm saying here, sorry, if empty name, meaning if name is empty, but I have not created this name variable. Instead of where it's supposed to be, I have db name. So let me clear that up and I'm going to save my file. So now when I go back to my form, and I try to put in the same information, name, email. Um, let's put in something different, another email address for myself. Let's change this to um, a different name. Let's say Joe Hardy, capital H, and I put in Joe at gmail.com. And I can put in the same phone number that I've had before and I hit add patient. It says patient added successfully. And that would mean that my system works. Okay. So next, we're going to be working on the update or what happens when the user clicks the update button.